The initiative. Riley decides he's interested in Buffy despite all the warning signs, and it turns out he has a secret of his own.
We open with a documentary-style narration about women and how much the narrator wants to bang all of them, and it turns out it's coming from one of Riley's friends. Riley's friend points out how hot Buffy is, who is causing all sorts of Hanna-Barbera mayhem while getting her food. That sound effect, that's the level of humor this show is at right now.
Riley says he thinks Buffy is kind of weird, and they also mention that her dating Parker is a sign of bad judgment, which is true.
We then transition to Spike, who got zapped before in the last episode. And I initially thought he was jerking off to Buffy or something.
Slayer.
And then I thought he was turning invisible or something based on that camera shot. But it turns out he's trapped in a white room, in a white hallway, in a white building, and he's also white.
We cut to Giles and Xander discussing Buffy's description of the military guys, even though Xander saw them too.
Giles determines their services won't be needed because the army guys are human, and Xander seems disappointed because he's so bored, and also useless in the show.
Buffy shows up and says she's not going on patrol because Willow is depressed about Oz leaving, and obviously that takes priority over stopping monsters from killing people.
Or human army guys from killing people for all they know. Back in Spike's cell, a bag of blood drops from the ceiling, but he's warned by the prisoner next to him not to drink it because it is drugged and they'll perform experiments on him. And when the Slayer is mentioned, Spike goes into a rage, assuming that Buffy is responsible for his imprisonment. Although I think even he would be able to connect the dots to see that Buffy really isn't that smart or capable enough for the type of operation he has found himself in. I mean, she was just saying she wouldn't investigate an obvious threat on the campus she's currently living on because there's a party.
In their psychology class, Willow mentions to Riley that he didn't call Oz's name for attendance, even though Oz never seemed to be in that class before anyway, and Willow is in denial that he dropped out, saying he will come back.
Professor Walsh shuts that shit down hard.
If your friend can't respect my schedule, I think it's best he not come back.
And Buffy confronts her, saying she should have some compassion. But Walsh counters, saying she isn't responsible for other people's emotional baggage, which is true, but the show wants us to agree with Buffy.
Even though she makes herself sound like a child. When Buffy leaves, Walsh admits to Riley that she likes Buffy for some reason.
'Cause the script said so.
Xander shows Giles a bunch of military gear that he stole, and Giles asks where it came from.
And he references the Halloween episode, but that scene doesn't really go anywhere.
And if he got this stuff back then, it means he's been holding onto it this whole time when they could have been using it to fight all kinds of stuff. And he reiterates that he doesn't have the knowledge of how to use all these weapons anymore.
Riley and his buddies are talking about Buffy's encounter with Walsh while tossing a frisbee inside, which was the most, hey, college moment we've seen in the show so far.
And they show no respect whatsoever for the other people who are trying to use the space for things that should actually be done indoors.
And then Parker, of all people, enters the room, and they start grilling him for details about his time with Buffy. Thought this idiot was gone.
He says they banged, and then she got all clingy, and he makes a nonsensical joke.
He compares Buffy to a toilet seat, which causes Riley to slug him.
Good.
After they leave, Riley is self-reflecting, and because the show has no sense of subtlety, says out loud, "Oh, I guess I do have feelings for Buffy," before 90s acoustic guitar music starts playing.
His dumb friends say that his interest was obvious, even though there's been no sign of it up until now, and he walks off to find her.
Back in the cell, some orderlies pick up Spike's unconscious body to put it on a stretcher, but it turns out he was just faking, and I'm sure no one in that whole prison tried that one before.
Spike tosses these guys around, then frees the vampire in the next cell, and they try to escape.
They keep diving under the thinnest security doors I've ever seen that make that stock GoldenEye sound effect.
And Spike ends up using the other vampire as a distraction while he deals with the final TNG level QuickTime event.
Riley has made it to Buffy's dorm room, but only finds Willow, and he says he wants to ask Buffy out and asks her for advice.
I would have thought him dating Buffy would not be allowed since he's a TA, but whatever.
I mean, there are weird, creepy old professors who date students.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Riley says he doesn't actually know anything about Buffy, and Willow says he's probably not going to treat her right anyway. But then she mentions that Buffy was taking her to the party later, which just happens to be at Riley's frat house.
Spike has successfully escaped and made it back to his lair, where Harmony's waiting. But I would think that the army guys might know where he's been hanging out, keeping tabs on him, but I guess not.
But as we'll see later, the army guys are not the most competent people either.
And Harmony's happy he's back, but disappointed that he's still stuck on killing Buffy.
While Giles and Xander are looking out for the army guys, Buffy and Willow get to the party.
Willow sidles over to Riley and gives him advice on how to approach Buffy, but when he finally makes it over to her, he sputters like a f***ing jalopy.
What a weird metaphor to use. Okay.
You're welcome for expanding your figurative language capabilities.
We cut to Xander finding Harmony preparing to light a bunch of stuff on fire.
It turns out it's all Spike stuff, because she's still upset that he's obsessed with Buffy.
And Xander and Harmony threaten each other before moving on to physical combat.
That joke kind of landed.
Went on a little too long, maybe. They prove to be evenly matched and call it a draw.
And Xander, only focusing on the fact that Spike is back, runs to find Buffy.
At the party, Riley talks to Willow about how he failed to talk to Buffy.
He's wallowing in self-pity, which makes him perfect for Buffy. They could both have whole dates where they just do that.
And Willow tries to be encouraging until a song by Oz's band starts playing on the stereo. Riley tells the guy operating it to change the song, and a bunch of people voice their displeasure, which was the most implausible thing that has ever happened in this show.
Willow decides to leave and tells Riley to relay that info to Buffy.
And before Riley can say anything else to Buffy, Xander comes in and pulls her out. And Riley's lame friends joke about Buffy brushing him off, showing how good of friends they are.
And as they're doing this, they make their way to a hidden elevator with focal checks and body scanners that is inside this house. And it's revealed that they're part of the group that kidnapped Spike, hunt demons, and perform experiments on supernatural stuff.
And even Professor Walsh is a part of it. She tells them a hostile escaped, which was clearly Spike, and they need to recapture him. It was all a very sudden, not to mention goofy as hell, reveal.
Meanwhile, Buffy is lamenting that Spike is back and interrupting her night off, and becomes determined to do her job and kill the vampire. What a concept.
Xander gives her a flare gun to signal if she needs help, and we see Spike looking up Buffy's address in a school computer.
Riley and his combat buddies see Buffy sitting on a bench to lure Spike out.
And I noted that they were not wearing face masks like they were in previous episodes, because now we know who they are and we need to see their faces.
Man, such good writing and direction. Worried for her safety, Riley decides to lose his gear and talk Buffy into leaving. And Buffy, worried for Riley's safety, tries to talk him into leaving.
Then they hear a scream and run off separately.
Meanwhile, Spike is actually at Buffy and Willow's room, where Willow is currently alone.
He knocks her around when she tries to escape and says he's going to kill her. He pins her down and gets ready to bite her, but no one hears her screams because of the loud stereo.
I like how she said, "I'll scream," and he's like, "All right, good." But then when she starts screaming, he's like, "Whoa, don't do that." And it turns out he can't actually bite her for some reason. And there are jokes about failing to perform and wanting to bite her just as a fallback because he really wanted Buffy. And I actually liked the conversation.
And Willow talks about feeling like no one likes her, and how she feels better when Spike admits that he wanted to bite her before. I thought it was another joke that went on a little too long.
But I thought it worked better than, for instance, the Xander Harmony thing.
I disagree.
Well, it's okay to be wrong.
I'm glad you're comfortable with your mistakes.
Well, I'm out of here.
The lame secret agents spot Spike with their high-tech temperature gauges and cut the power to the dorm building. They bust in and capture Spike when he tries to bite one of them.
But they're all interrupted by Buffy and her best impression of A New Hope.
And I noted that it seemed like she shot the first guy in the face, but he seemed to be okay.
During the mayhem, Spike manages to escape.
And Riley, who is unable to identify Buffy, tells them to abort.
But he was doing pretty good combat-wise if that's all he was able to see.
And of course, Buffy just lets them all go.
And as soon as they exit the hallway, not even the building, the lights immediately just turn back on. I imagine they would have had to go past some other people before they got outside.
Well, also, how did they turn the power back on like that? They report back to Walsh and claim that Spike is working with a really big, really strong guy.
They also revealed that they implanted something in Spike to prevent him from causing harm to any living thing without experiencing intense pain.
Even though earlier he beat up those lab coat guys pretty good.
Yeah, what if he steps on a bug by accident?
Yeah, I have questions as to how that's supposed to work.
And what is living thing? Does that include plants?
He'll never be able to eat a salad again.
Is it direct damage? What if he doesn't water a plant that needs it? He's indirectly causing harm, right? What if someone else perceives it as damage, but he doesn't, but he's still the one causing it? Does it also include emotional damage? Because he does that a lot.
I'm sure these are all questions that will be answered by the next episode. The next day, Riley and Buffy apologize to each other for their weird behavior.
And Riley reveals that he asked Willow for help in getting to know Buffy better. And we also find out that this goofy guitar music is going to be the Buffy-Riley relationship soundtrack. Great.
The initiative. Overall?
Okay. So there's a big anti-supernatural force that exists underneath a college campus. That's what these army guys have been doing. And this college is pretty much right next to everything that's happened in this show for the past 3 seasons. So where were they when babies were being fed to giant CGI snakes? Or that frat house where the dude was a giant snake? Or when the mayor turned into a super giant demon snake? I think it would be really funny if that whole facility was populated by all of the monsters and demons and whatnot that Buffy just let run away. And these army guys were waiting just out of sight and immediately bagged them and hauled them back to the facility. And how did they not know about Buffy? Spike's cell neighbor specifically mentioned the Slayer. And if this group aims to be knowledgeable about all this supernatural stuff, have they never encountered the tale of the Slayer? And is their protocol the same for all of these monsters as what they did for Spike? Because even though they turned off the lights, they ran through a dorm full of people with giant guns in army attire. I would think some of those people would run out under the assumption that there was some sort of terrorist attack on campus, but I guess not.
And if they know they're going after a vampire, why do they have all these guns? I mean, we have seen that you can tranquilize a vampire, but then why didn't they just shoot Spike, knock him out, instead of fighting with him?
Are they part of the government? Are we going to have that group of invisible assassins from Out of Mind, Out of Sight? I've been waiting for follow-up on that for so long. Giles and Xander scenes didn't have anything to do with anything. I thought at least at the point when Xander gave Buffy the flare gun and said, "Let us know if you need help," that would have him and Giles getting involved, but they never did. So that was pretty pointless. Riley turning into an 11-year-old boy just because he likes a girl was so stupid. And he and Buffy starting a relationship is not surprising. And the way they're both going to have to hide their nightly activities from each other will result in what I'm sure will be hilarious and wacky situations. The tone shifts in this episode were pretty dumb and just downplayed what they're actually there to do. It was too much, too often. The only conversation I actually liked in this episode was between Willow and Spike. And because Spike is involved with this group now and has this implant or whatever, I hope that means he'll be sticking around this time. A lot of stuff actually happened in this episode, which was refreshing. Whether or not it was all good or made sense, that's asking too much of the show. But at least it was a step in a direction, which was good for me. So I gave it a B-.
Interesting. I gave it a C. For a while in this episode, it seemed to me like Riley and Willow might become a thing. And I even thought at the end that that was what Buffy was going to say to Riley.
And that would work perfectly because Buffy at the same time would realize she actually has feelings for Riley too and then can mope about it for 26 episodes.
Yeah, think of the drama. The reveal of Riley and his lame friends secretly being demon hunters was pretty goofy and very hard to take seriously. Dealing with that while also dealing with teaching classes would be a lot, especially for the extra serious Walsh, who is the only one that I actually have some respect for out of that group. But like you said, at least it's some kind of development for this season, and on a pretty large scale, which is intriguing. The stuff with Harmony I thought was pretty funny, but this episode was pretty awkward tonally, especially when Spike was attacking Willow. It seemed to be framed as a rape metaphor at first, but then they made jokes about it right after he told her that he was going to kill her. I thought that was a little weird. It didn't really fit for me. Willow moping about Oz wasn't as bad as when Buffy mopes, because they didn't focus on it as much, so that's good. The setup of Xander having all those weapons, like you said, didn't really pay off in any way. Even when Buffy used the flare, it was just a minor thing. Instead of having everybody be blinded by the flare, they could have just as easily said that they couldn't identify her because it was dark. And maybe she knocked off their night vision goggles or whatever. I hope they don't just ignore Xander's stockpile now that it's been introduced. It would be cool if every single episode Buffy comes up with some new weapon that she's using to blow vampires away. This episode wasn't terrible, but Riley's friends are really lame.
Agreed.
And a lot of screen time was given over to them. I really hope the writing for those characters gets better if they're going to be a continuing part of the show. But I am glad that the show is at least going somewhere. So we'll see what happens.